guys, it's Faye from Solar Flow, and I am back with an all-new video. Today's topic is a deep dive behind the veil psychic energy read into Adam and Eve, the story of our creation and the Garden of Eden. So we are going to be exploring the meaning and purpose in God creating the 3D earthly domain that we all reside on, the energy that Adam and Eve, and thus the energy that all men and women were created with, and also looking into what may have gone down in the Garden of Eden and with the snake, and what this all has to do with events that are playing out in the world today. Because yes, it's all connected. This and so much more. And you are not going to want to miss this video. However, before we get into the goods that the guides brought, I'm going to start by sharing some three-dimensional information that was acquired off of the different subjects' Wikipedia pages. Now, this is not because I think anyone may not be familiar with who Adam and Eve are. No. It is because there is some percentage of the channeled information that is going to directly correlate to three-dimensional information that exists in the world, such as on a site like Wikipedia, or something that we ourselves may have learned in school or Sunday school. And it is, as the content creator of this video, my humblest of opinions, that if you watch the video all the way through, even if it's not in one sitting, but specifically if you don't skip this first portion, that when we get into the channeled energy reading portion, the information that I share there is just going to resonate on a deeper level because there is some foundation of what it is connected to, which is what I'm going to share right now. So please do not skip this first portion. Now, I'm going to start by sharing the Wikipedia pages of first Adam and Eve, then the Garden of Eden, and then one more subsequent one, which will also pave the way to me sharing an anecdotal story with you guys. And if you like my energetic interpretations, you will really enjoy the anecdotal story because it directly pertains to this subject. So here we go. Adam and Eve, according to their Wikipedia page. Adam and Eve, according to the creation myth. Now keep this in mind for the energy reading portion that Wikipedia refers to it as a myth. Adam and Eve, according to the creation myth of the Abrahamic religions, were the first man and woman. They are central to the belief that humanity is in essence a single family, with everyone descended from a single pair of original ancestors, as in we all came from Adam and Eve. They also provide the basis for the doctrines of the fall of man and original sin, which are important beliefs in Christianity, although not held in Judaism or Islam. In the book of Genesis of the Hebrew Bible, there are two creation narratives with two distinct perspectives. In the first, Adam and Eve are not named. Instead, God created humankind in God's image and instructed them to multiply and to be stewards over everything else that God had made. In the second narrative, God fashions Adam from dust and places him in the Garden of Eden. Adam is told that he can eat freely of all the trees in the garden except for the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Subsequently, Eve is created from one of Adam's ribs to be his companion. They are innocent and unembarrassed about their nakedness. However, a serpent convinces Eve to eat fruit from the forbidden tree, and she gives some of that fruit to Adam. These acts not only give them additional knowledge, but also give them the ability to conjure negative and destructive concepts such as shame and evil. God later curses the serpent and the ground. God prophetically tells the woman, now they've been depersonalized, now there's no names, it's just God prophetically tells the woman and the man what will be the consequences of their sin of disobeying him. Then he banishes them from the Garden of Eden. That concludes the 3D information into Adam and Eve. We are now going to be moving on to some 3D information about the Garden of Eden. So the Garden of Eden is a biblical paradise where Adam and Eve lived before being expelled from the garden. It is known as the terrestrial paradise or the Garden of God. It was the first home of humanity created by God for Adam and Eve. The garden contained the tree of life and the forbidden tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Adam and Eve lived in peace with the animals and could eat from any tree except the tree of knowledge. After eating from the tree of knowledge, God punished Adam and Eve by making them leave the garden. And the story of the Garden of Eden is a theological use of mythological themes to explain human progression. So here we have another explanation where it is being told to us that it is again mythological. And in case you yourself are wondering where it is said the Garden of Eden might be, according to their Wikipedia page, various suggestions have been made for its location. At the head of the Persian Gulf in southern Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers run into the sea, in Armenia, and even in Jackson County, Missouri. But one thing that I found to be interesting was what was not said could potentially be the location of it, which is why I'm going to share one more Wikipedia page with you. This is something called the Cave of the Patriarchs. And it is said that Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, and Jacob and Leah are buried there. Now, these are Jewish patriarchs and matriarchs. They are said to be buried in the Cave of the Patriarchs, which is coincidentally located in the West Bank, which is disputed territory. Keep this in mind for the energy reading portion because it's going to directly correlate. But you know what else is interesting about the Cave of the Patriarchs? It is also said that Adam and Eve are buried there. Now, this may not appear to be notable, except for the fact that also in the Cave of the Patriarchs, there's a door in the ground. So it's not like a freestanding upright door that somebody can walk through. It's more like a manhole. And in the Cave of the Patriarchs is this manhole. And next to it's covered. Next to this covered manhole is a sign that says it's the location to the Garden of Eden. So is it a stretch of the imagination to say that however Adam and Eve got out of the garden, whether they were banished or they just in a drunken stupor wandered out of it, but however they got out of it, they lived their life and then they were buried not too far from the entrance to it? Now, interestingly enough, another thing about the Cave of the Patriarchs is that it is a revered site for both Jews and Muslims. It is also one of the best known but least explored sites in the Holy Land. And the cave is located in the West Bank. Above ground, the site is marked by the enclosure of Abraham, which contains a mosque, a courtyard, and a Jewish network of rooms and passages. The actual buried places are in the cave beneath, which is not accessible to the public. So even though it's called the Cave of the Patriarchs, it's not actually, it's a cave underground. But if you look at the picture online, it's actually like a freestanding building. Now, the reason that I'm even choosing to discuss it at all, other than the fact that it comes into the energy reading portion later on, is that I wanted to share with you anecdotally my own experience when I was there last in 2007. and that if you trust my energetic assessments and insights, I thought you would find this to be particularly notable. So at least this is how it was back then. I would think that it's still like this now because it is highly disputed territory. But again, when I was last there was only 2 times a year that it was open to the public, because for the rest of the year it's used as a mosque. And only twice a year is it open for other people to go there. Now you might be wondering, why would anybody want to go there anyway if it's a mosque? Well, it is said that if one goes to the burial site of a holy person, the soul of that person, if you pray to them, they can act as an intermediary on your behalf and go to God and advocate for you that the things that you are praying on would come to be in the 3D material plane. So it's considered to be auspicious if one goes to the burial place of any such holy person. And I think one could certainly make the claim that the Jewish patriarchs and matriarchs would consider to be holy people. So that's why people would want to go there. So again, I was last there in 2007, and let's say, I don't know, we were there for an hour. Probably for 55 minutes out of the hour that I was there, I sat on the floor with my hand on the door to what is said to be the entrance to the Garden of Eden. Because the energy of what I experienced there with my hand on the door was unlike anything else that I have experienced anywhere. The energy of the door itself was even more powerful and high vibe and potent than the energy that I experienced praying at the Western Wall. And for anyone who doesn't know what the Western Wall is, it is one of the 4 remaining walls that housed the temple of where it is said God's soul essence had resided on the earthly plane in the Jewish temple. Now, the Jewish temple no longer exists, so God's soul's essence no longer resides here. But there is one of the 4 walls that remains from the outside of it, which is the Western Wall. So one goes there because it's the closest they can get to the location of where God's soul resided in the 3D earthly domain. But the energy in the Cave of the Patriarchs, when my hand was on the door, was even more potent and high vibe than the Western Wall. Now, keep this in mind further, the fact that the Cave of the Patriarchs is disputed territory, and that the Western Wall and where the Jewish temple is also hotly contested territory, because on the other side of the Western Wall is a Muslim mosque. So there are 2 religions that are fighting over the territory of certain locations in Israel. Now, this video is not about this, and if anyone's gonna come in here with some low vibe energy and you're gonna try to make this about the dispute, you're proving your ignorance that you haven't watched the video all the way through. Because this is one tiny part of a very, very long and extensive video, and the other corresponding part to what I'm talking about is much, much later on in the video. But I'm again just reinforcing to you and reminding to you that it's the location of the patriarchs where they are buried, and the matriarchs is used as a mosque. And on the other side of the Western Wall is also where there is a mosque. Now, isn't it interesting, or notable one could say, that these holy locations where the soul of God perhaps is said to have resided would be so hotly contested, and where the door to the entrance to the Garden of Eden is in a location that is also hotly contested? Keep this in mind. That concludes the 3D information share, and now we are going to be getting into the energy reading portion. So, the story of our creation, Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. Why did God create the Garden of Eden? It was created as a bridge or a go-between between the divine realm that God resides in and the newly created earthly domain that man was going to reside in. Because the earthly domain was the first of its kind, not the only and not the last, but it was the first. And it was designed to be the location, or the first location, where souls were now going to have bodies. Because there are other places in the universe where our souls are nothing but energy. There are no bodies, and there is no anything three-dimensional for us to interact with. But the intention of the Garden of Eden was for it to be a bridge between the divine realm and the 3D material realm. And the purpose of God creating Adam and later on Eve, and specifically here on Earth, was with the intention of God bestowing a spark of divinity inside of Adam, in his soul, and a 3D world for Adam to now create in. So the Garden of Eden was this union of the divine and the material. And the earthly domain was created with the intention of man passing through the Garden of Eden and coming to the 3D material plane. Because God has no physical body and is pure energy, thus the spark of godliness was placed inside of Adam, and Adam, who now had a body, could take the spark of divinity inside of him and had a 3D material plane that his body could create in. Because again, as I had just said a moment ago, there are locations in the universe where souls are nothing but pure energy, and they have no bodies at all. But the earthly domain was the first of its kind, and thus the Garden of Eden was created as a bridge between these two realms. It was designed to be a go-between between the divine and pure energetic realm and the 3D material realm, where Adam's soul, that is now housed in a body, could get used to having a body. So it was kind of like preschool, which gets little kids ready for actual school. So it's a time when their social circle slowly expands, and they're perhaps learning basic alphabet so that when they can get to school, they have some idea about what is going on and what they are going to be learning. Similarly, the garden was the location where Adam was designed to adjust to his new body and to acclimate to the energy here on Earth, which is so much more dense. And I have compared it to navigating your life as if you lived in quicksand. So therefore, this bridge domain, the Garden of Eden, was designed to be beautiful and calm and soothing and to indulge Adam's senses. So along with all the newness that his body was experiencing, it would also not be too jarring of an energy. So imagine a caveman that is used to traversing various rugged terrain. Perhaps he only wears a loincloth and he hunts for food. He does not have language, but instead a series of grunts meant to denote different meanings. So imagine said caveman is dropped into Times Square, New York City in 2025. The organic terrain that he is used to has now been replaced with concrete and tall looming buildings. The plants and the tundra replaced with flashing lights and large screen TVs that flash images. And the quiet that he has been used to was replaced with cars honking, music playing, and people talking. The caveman would lose it because it would be too much sensory overload. And I don't know about you, I give that caveman 3 seconds, the time it's going to take for him to look around before he drops down onto the ground, curls himself up into a ball, covers his head with his hands, and starts rocking to self-soothe. And that is a person who already has a body, who is already used to his body and already used to the heavy, dense 3D energy on the earthly domain. So that's just somebody that was dropped into a different and far busier and noisier location. And even he wouldn't be able to handle it. So then imagine even more so Adam being the first man that was created in this earthly domain, how much more jarring the experience would have been for him to go from being nothing but pure energy to suddenly having a body, and not only that, having his expansive soul and expansive energy compressed and squashed into said body, and then navigating on this earthly domain with the energy that is so heavy and dense that it's akin to quicksand. It would have been too much and too jarring. That is why the Garden of Eden was created. Because Adam was the first soul to come to this new world and to be the first to have a body. So the location that he first came to mitigate the amount that it was jarring was the Garden of Eden. It was this beautiful terrestrial paradise with beautiful harmonic energy that was meant to inspire and to soothe his new body, not to create misalignment already. That came later on. Stick around, we're getting there. So Adam, being the very, very first one that came here, what kind of energy do you think he had? Was he meek? Was he a mouse? Did he come here against his will? Is there some cosmic milk carton floating around with a picture of Adam's soul on it that says missing? If found, please return to his home planet? No. Because just like we all agreed to come here in our very, very first incarnation and every subsequent incarnation, just like the starseeds have to agree to be seated here, same thing with Adam. But even more so as the very first man that was going to come to the new world, imagine how brave he had to be. So Adam's energy was one of a pioneer, a renegade, if you will, because he volunteered to come here, to be the first soul that was going to have the first body. Not as in he was ever the first soul that existed, but he was the soul that was going to come here, and he was going to be the one to have the first body in this new world. So yes, he was a pioneer and a renegade, and quite brave to agree to come here, to be the first one to have a body in this new domain. Because again, while Earth was not the only and it was not the last, it was the first material plane that was designed for human inhabitants. So in keeping Adam's pioneering renegade energetic blueprint in mind, God created him in alignment with the sun's energy. The sun as in S-U-N. But also, it's kind of like a clean double entendre, because it's like the sun, but it's also like, it's like the sun in the sky, but it's also like the sun, because Adam was the first son of God to come to the earthly domain and to have a body. It actually kind of works both ways. So Adam was created in alignment with the sun's energy. Action-oriented, fiery and masculine. Because again, to be the first of anything, it involves being action-oriented and to have that kind of go-get kind of energy that we associate with masculine energy. So for my friends that are into astrology, Adam's energy is akin to that of Aries, which is the first sign in the zodiac. So it is, if you will, the creation, Aries energy is the creation of the self. It is the creation of identity and of the ego. It is the self recognizing that there is a self. So for Adam, it was the equivalent to Adam's soul now recognizing his inner self now had an outer self, as in now had a body. And now that Adam had a body, came all of these new, different, interesting experiences and awarenesses. When Adam was thirsty, he would drink water. When Adam was hungry, he would eat. And then because he would eat and drink, he would go to the bathroom. Then he would discover that he was tired, so he would go to sleep. And then when he would wake up from sleep, he would have morning wood. These are all totally normal reactions that a person has with the awareness of the body and the needs and the reactions of the body. And Adam had discovered in the morning, when he woke up with his morning wood, it felt nice to touch it. And then he further discovered that it felt even nicer when he would put his penis into things. And what were those things that Adam was putting his penis into? Well, Eve had not yet been created. But we do know that there were a lot of animals in the Garden of Eden. Thus, this led to the creation of all new species. So today we would call them mythological creatures, but the idea of said mythological creatures did not come from nowhere or simply from somebody's imagination. It in fact came from a long lost history that included centaurs, half man, half horse, and mermaids and mermen, half man, half fish, and harpies, half man, half bird, minotaurs, half man, half bull, and even mandrakes, half man, half plant. Do you think it's far-fetched that these things actually once existed? Well, 2 points to consider. First, this was the Garden of Eden, which was the bridge between the divine, expansive, and one could say magical realm, where there are no restrictions, and the heavy, dense earthly domain, where there are restrictions. So because it was still closer to the divine realm, is it not possible that some magic had remained in the Garden of Eden, where it was possible? And if the snake could talk, isn't it possible that all of the other animals could also have talked? And one more point to keep in mind. We also know that many generations later on, there was somebody named Noah. And Noah was guided by God to build a boat. And he was directed by God to only bring certain animals onto the boat, but not all animals, because there were some animals that were an abomination, one could say, such as the half-man, half-animal combinations. And that Adam was not designed to procreate with them, although he did. And that is why God did not want these procreated beings to come forth into the world thereafter. So, Adam was getting sexy time on with the animals that could talk, because he suddenly had the awareness of the body and the needs and pleasure that came with said body. And free will very much reigned supreme in the Garden of Eden, just like it does here on the earthly domain. So it was Adam's exercising his free will to explore and to experiment. That's what he did with the animals. But it was not just free will that resided in the Garden of Eden, because there also existed contrast. Because contrast has existed from the beginning of time as well. In fact, from the creation of the Garden of Eden. Because Adam also experienced, in addition to his exercising his free will, Adam experienced contrast. And his contrast was Lilith. Now, Lilith is said to have been the partner that Adam had prior to Eve. However, Lilith, she didn't listen to Adam. That's what we've been told about her, right? But here's a better question. Why was Lilith not mentioned in the story of creation? It's not because she wasn't an obedient woman, because we're getting to the energy of what women were created with a little later on, but not yet. Lilith was not mentioned in the story of creation because she was in fact a demon spirit. But she was a demon spirit that had a body. Because again, I remind you, this was the bridge. This was the go-between location. There was still the presence and the existence of magic that existed, which is why animals could talk. So it was also a location where there was the presence of other entities as well. But this was contrast. So Lilith was a demon spirit who had a body. And with it, she had dark energy. Because again, demon spirit. And she began to lead Adam astray with her contrast and the influence that it had on his free will. And her energy was a defiant one. She was diabolical, and she delighted in not listening to Adam, but even further, intentionally acting in a way that would rile him up. And she also introduced Adam to sodomy, by which he connected to her kundalini, and he had siphoned her dark energy off of her. Now I'm briefly going to mention kundalini and how it is accessed through sodomy. So it is said that we all have residing in our abdomen coiled energy. Coincidentally, it is actually said to be coiled like a serpent. So we have this coiled energy, perhaps even akin to how a snake is coiled up. And through various different exercises and practices, such as yoga and chanting and Tai Chi, we can unlock that coiled bundle of energy, and it can travel up our chakras or meridian points to the crown of the head, in which we can then connect to the divine. However, that same bundle of energy can be accessed through the activity and practice of sodomy. And that is very much the case of what had happened here. Lilith had introduced Adam to sodomy by way that he was able to access her kundalini, and he had siphoned her dark energy off of her. Because again, she was a demon spirit. Theirs was neither a happy nor a healthy relationship, and it was the equivalent energetically of a hate fuck. It was not divine, it was not loving, but there was a lot of angry sex. And it was shown to me that their relationship was an example of what happens when two masculine energies come together and how Adam was thrown out of alignment by it. Therefore, Adam had the realization and the recognition through the contrast that was Lilith. He perhaps needed a softer energy that was going to balance him out. Because again, I remind you, his natural inherent blueprint energetically was one of a renegade soul. So he was already fiery. And then we're coupling that with the energy that he was created with in the energy and alignment of the sun, which further exacerbated his already masculine and fiery blueprint. Enter Eve. So whereas Adam had exercised his free will and he had experienced contrast, the Creator, as in God, had seen all of this playing out, and with the Creator's wisdom, had created a more compatible match for Adam, which is why Eve had been created. And she was also created from him, as in from one of his ribs, so that way she could uniquely understand him and be more compatible with him because she was literally made from him. So whereas Adam was created by the energy of the sun and was more fiery, Eve was created with new moon energy. And whereas Adam was the equivalent of Aries, Eve was created more energetically in alignment with Cancerian energy, a water sign, tied to the home. That's the wrong word. That has negative associations. More rooted and connected to the energy of her home. And Eve was created to be soft and emotional and to balance Adam out. So men and women too, as in all of us, we were created with the intention of being different but equal. Because as the contrast of Lilith had shown, too much of the same energy is one that could burn the new world down to the ground. So we were indeed created to be different, and our bodies even reflect that. Because our bodies were designed to fit together like two pieces in a puzzle, with a man's penis meant to be inserted into a woman's vagina, which also reflects the different energies that men and women embody. Men were designed to be masculine and more dominant. They were designed to assert themselves. Their body reflects that because they literally have to insert a part of their body into a woman. They were designed to be more assertive energetically. Women were designed to be receptive and to receive a man into her body and thus his energy into her body. And with it, receive his energy. But by this exchange of the masculine and feminine energy, the man is softened because on his own and without a sexual release with a healthy relationship that balances him out, he could burn the world down, or certainly the world directly around him. So experiencing an orgasm, when a man experiences an orgasm with his woman, not as in any woman, but his woman, and also not as in, this is, I claim ownership and I own you, not that kind of his woman, but his one woman that he chooses to have sex with. When a man experiences an orgasm with his one woman, crap, I lost my place. When a man experiences an orgasm with his one woman, he is softened by her energy and by the divine energetic exchange that is shared between the two of them. And since you all love my illustrations, this is what the exchange between a man and his one woman and a woman and her one man looks like. This is the sexual exchange. It's two halves of a circle, and both of the halves have an arrow that connect them and feed into the other half. Because when it is a union of one man and one woman, and they are sharing their divine masculine and feminine energies, this is what it looks like. It feeds itself. It is a self-contained energetic system. So Eve was designed to be more grounded and to balance Adam's energy out. Because Lilith, being a demon energy, was the equivalent of air. So she had stoked Adam's flames and had spread them. So it was akin to the wind spreading a fire and making it burn uncontrollable. But Eve provided a stable ground because she was designed to be more grounded and balanced. So Eve had provided a stable ground for Adam's flames to safely burn within. So think of the energetic exchange between Adam and Eve, not like a wind that spreads the fire and thus it burns uncontrollably, but more akin to a fire at a campsite that has stones placed all around it containing the flames so they will not get out of control. So now, after I have spent all of this time extolling the virtues of the energy of Eve and how she was designed to balance Adam out, how did she so royally and monumentally fuck up by eating from the tree of knowledge, you may ask? Well, just like Adam had his free will, so did Eve. And just like Adam experienced contrast with Lilith, so did Eve, because the snake was a point of contrast. And Eve was exercising her free will when she had chosen to accept the fruit from the snake from the tree of knowledge. So the sin, in fact, was no sin at all, but simply the introduction of contrast and Eve exercising her free will. The choice Eve had made was an indication that both Adam and Eve, having experienced contrast, were now ready for even more contrast. And they were ready to graduate from the Garden of Eden and to a world that had even more contrast, as in the earthly domain that we now all reside on. However, it was not because they had done anything wrong, but simply because they were ready. Adam and Eve were never meant to stay in the Garden of Eden forever. Remember, it was designed to be a bridge. They were never meant to stay there. Just like little kids are not meant to stay in preschool forever either. Because if they do, they simply would never grow. So this then begs the question, if eating from the tree was not in fact a sin, were they truly never meant to eat from the tree at all then? And if they were not meant to eat from it, why did God place it there? Was it to entrap them? So was God like an undercover DEA agent? But instead of entrapping them with illicit drugs and then busting them, he was entrapping them with illicit knowledge? Come on, guys. God has a whole universe to tuck things away in. So if he didn't want them eating from the tree at all, why did he put it there? Where they would have access to it. So since we're talking so much about contrast and how they were experiencing their contrast, was it placed there for contrast purposes? No. This would be mastery level contrast and not something that these two new baby souls in new bodies were ready for. So for example, would you give a preschooler algebra? No, you would give them something developmentally appropriate for them to do, such as reciting the alphabet without saying LMNOP like it's one long run-on word, but are separate and distinct letters like L, M, N, O, P. That would be developmentally appropriate. Not having a toddler do advanced calculus or algebra. It's the same exact thing here. This would be mastery level contrast, not basic bitch contrast. So if the tree of knowledge was not in fact illicit knowledge, what then was it? Well, it was shown to me as being a source of knowledge indeed, but not basic bitch five senses knowledge, because that was the purpose of the Garden of Eden, where Adam and then Eve could get used to their five senses. What could they touch? What could they taste? What could they see, smell, and hear? Those are the basic bitch five senses. That was the purpose of the Garden of Eden, for them to get used to having their body in a beautiful location. But the tree of knowledge was in fact a source of knowledge, but it was extrasensory gifts and abilities knowledge, as in clairaudient, claircognizant, clairvoyant, clairsentient. So by eating from the tree, Eve was able to download and integrate her own gifts and abilities. And only after that period was she then ready, because she had downloaded and integrated what it meant to have gifts and abilities. So first, her body had to acclimate what it was like to have a body and the energy on the heavy 3D domain. And then once her body had gotten used to that, she was ready for different knowledge, the gifts and ability knowledge. And only after she had acclimated to having that were they then ready to leave the Garden of Eden, because they were never meant to stay there at all. This is why they did not immediately leave the garden, as first Eve and then Adam subsequently needed time to download and acclimate to their own new senses, gifts, and abilities. And once they were ready to go, as in they were ready to leave the Garden of Eden, they did. But it was without the dramatic send-off that Wikipedia makes it out to be, that they were kicked out. It wasn't like that, because they were never meant to stay there at all. So, if Adam and Eve were in fact the first two souls that now had bodies that graduated from the bridge domain that was the Garden of Eden to the earthly domain, does that mean that they were the first two people to populate the earth? As in, did we all come from Adam and Eve? Yes, of course we did. But despite this, there are many lessons to be learned in conjunction to contrast and the world today and how people experience contrast with their free will. Because despite the fact that we are all indeed related, there is still an enormous amount of conflict in the world. Now, this is nothing new. Conflict has always existed. Because I remind you, the very first generation that was born outside of the Garden of Eden were Adam and Eve's two sons, Cain and Abel, who are perhaps best known for Cain unaliving Abel. So conflict and contrast and our free will have always been interconnected and interrelated and have kind of done this sacred dance with one another. So just because conflict existed back then, it has not stopped producing conflict out in the world, despite the fact that we are all in fact related. Because notably there is conflict in the Middle East, and that is no coincidence. And it is also further no coincidence that the supposed door to the Garden of Eden, as in the Bridgely domain that connects us back to the sacred divine realm, is located in disputed territory. It's located in a building that is both a mosque to the Muslim people as well as a holy burial site to people of the Jewish faith. So here, in modern day times, you have a group of two people that came from the original two people that are experiencing contrast. It's in fact not that far different from the contrast that the first two people that were born outside of the Garden of Eden had experienced. It's still going on in modern day times because that is the energy of the 3D earthly domain. So you have two groups of people that are literally fighting over land. Does it get any more 3D than that? Because that's the energy of the 3D earthly domain. So contrast has always existed, and the interplay of contrast with free will has always existed. And the energy in the 3D domain has led to the creation of contrast between these two groups of people that are literally fighting over land. But the door to the Garden of Eden being located in disputed territory actually tells a far different story. Because remember, the Garden of Eden was the bridge between the 3D material plane and the divine realm. So the fact that it is in disputed territory indicates that in actuality, as in not in the heavy, dense 3D material energy where they are disputing over the land itself, but the fact that the door that connects us to the divine realm being located there indicates that we are in fact all welcome in the divine realm. It does not matter what God you worship. It does not matter what religion you prescribe to, if any. It does not matter how you choose to pray to God or if at all. It does not matter if you live on disputed territory or not, because what actually matters in the divine realm is that we are all the children of God. That is why it is not a coincidence that the door to the bridge that connects us to the divine realm is in disputed territory, because that's the energy of the 3D. But the bridge being located there carries us right over to the divine realm where none of this 3D identification even matters. Because we are all the children of God. But just like you have the door to the Garden of Eden, that is in this disputed territory, which behind the veil tells a far different story about how we're actually all welcome in the divine realm. We also have the location of the Western Wall, by which Jews and the Muslims also still do pray by. One side is the Jewish territory and the other side is the Muslim territory, in which there is a mosque. Now that too is not a coincidence, and that is due to the fact that what we know about the cabal is they love to take everything that is sacred and they will pervert and corrupt it. And that's exactly what they have done with the conflict in the Middle East. Because you have two people that are again fighting over the 3D material land. But the land itself, outside of the dispute, is incredibly high vibe and incredibly potent, because it is said in the location of the Western Wall, it's where God's essence resided in the 3D domain once upon a time a temple here. That means that the earth in this location is incredibly high vibe. And the only energy that one could experience when they were there, if they were not incited to hate one another or to fear one another, would be love. Because on the other side, as in the divine realm, where there is a bridge not too far from there that connects us to the divine realm, there are no heavy, dense 3D human emotions, such as fear or hatred. The only emotion that exists on the other side is love. Therefore, if these two groups of people were not incited by the cabal to fight with one another and to hate one another, if they could tap in to the natural energy that is there, all they would experience for one another would be love. And there would be no conflict and there would be no war, because all they would experience for one another is love. Now this is going to begin an entire section of the video in which we are going to be exploring contrast and the artificial introduction of the contrast from the cabal, in how they are taking the elements that we have discussed leading up until now, as in our interconnectedness because we all come from the same two people, and our divine masculine and feminine energies, and our purpose in actually even being created to come to the earthly domain. This whole section here is going to be about how there has been the introduction of artificial contrast from the cabal in corrupting and perverting all of these elements. So here we go. As I had just said a moment ago, we all came from the same two people, Adam and Eve. So Adam and Eve being all of our ancestors, as in it's the two people that we are all born from, because we're all related. Doesn't matter how we look, doesn't matter how we pray, we're all related. That has been corrupted by all of the innocent and beautiful children being incited to hate one another. And innocent children are being taught that one group of people are the victims and another group are the oppressors, and it has nothing to do except for the amount of melanin in their skin. And how 3D is that? So not only are they being taught to hate one another in the Middle East, but now children are being taught to hate one another and to fear one another, because one's the oppressor and one's the victim, and it has nothing to do with what's inside, as in the soul, but it only has to do with the 3D material, as in the skin, the body that houses the soul. And divine feminine and masculine energies have been corrupted by the trans agenda. Because there is naturally occurring trans, but there is also a trans agenda that is being introduced and playing out in the world at the same time. So you have the divine feminine and masculine energies that we all inhabit, depending on the gender that we were born into, being corrupted by the trans agenda that intentionally and deliberately confuses young and impressionable minds at a time when they are in fact the most vulnerable. And they're being told that if they are confused or if they are unhappy with their life, then it's due to the fact that they were born into the wrong body. Again, it's the 3D material housing of the actual inherent soul. This is all being done instead of educating them on their divine nature and their unique energetic contribution that is associated with it. Now, just like Adam and Eve's collective energy can be corrupted, the feminine and masculine energies, independent of each other, can also be corrupted. Because we're going to talk a little bit about the contrast of Lilith's energy playing out into the world and how that in fact has been corrupted. Because what we discovered in the original part of this video was that Lilith was a demon entity who had a body, and she was throwing Adam out of alignment because their energy was too much of the same fiery energy, and when these two energies came together, it was combustive and it could burn the entire new world down. But in a way, are women today not being encouraged to be more like Lilith? Are we not being encouraged to embrace our wild side and to be sexually free? And to perhaps even be defiant of men, as in the patriarchy? Are we not, as women, rewarded by society for being boss babes and told that we slay when we sell our bodies on OnlyFans? This is not, in fact, contrast, but it is a very intentional corruption and perversion of the natural, divine, feminine energy. Because by welcoming in more of this boss babe masculine energy that we are encouraged to embrace, we are in fact inviting in more of the demon spirit energy. And just as Lilith had riled Adam up and had dysregulated him, this is an energy that when it comes together and expands, can destroy the world. And as we know, the cabal loves to corrupt and pervert everything. Therefore, it is not just women's energy that has been corrupted by us being encouraged to embrace masculine energy, but they've in fact perverted energy altogether by telling men that their natural inherent masculine energy that they were divinely born with is now considered toxic. And that women are meant to forgo their divine feminine nature in favor of becoming more masculine. This is in fact a destructive and not constructive energy, because I remind you, we were designed to be different, separate but equal, and with an intelligence behind it. Because Adam was the first man that was created, he was created in alignment with masculine oriented Aries sun energy. But to balance all of that fiery, brave, renegade, pioneering energy, Eve was created to be softer, in alignment with water energy. But us being to embrace more of this Lilith-like energy, it's, again, I remind you, a dark energy, and was the energy that had in fact corrupted Adam's own energy. The snake itself, which was nothing more than a point of contrast for Eve to experience, has also been taken over and corrupted, because the snake is the symbol of the World Health Organization. And if you've ever seen the symbol, it's a depiction of the earth with a snake, and I think it's a snake, two snakes kind of like dancing and interplaying with one another until their heads come out on top of the earth with the tongue hanging out of it. It's the earth with the snake, but the snake has taken over the earth, as in the snake is dominating the earth. So they've taken a point of contrast and corrupted it, and with it, corrupted women's care in modern medicine as well. Because these same people prescribe to the belief and the ideology that because of Eve, we really were kicked out of the Garden of Eden. Even though it is probably the same people that corrupted the whole story in the first place. But because of Eve's grave sin, instead of it just being Eve experienced contrast, no. It's Eve committed a grave sin that got us kicked out of the Garden of Eden. So because of that, women must perpetually and forever be punished by modern medicine as well as society. This will in part explain why there is such an overproliferation of breast cancer awareness. And in case you missed my excellent video on mammograms, link down below, spoiler alert, it's not actually in fact because the powers that be care about us so deeply and fundamentally that they want us to have breast cancer awareness. No. It is in fact done to incite fear associated with our lady parts, and that God created a faulty design. So just like God created a faulty design with the trans agenda, because if people are unhappy with their life, they're told it's because they experience gender dysmorphia, and it's because they're in fact wrong. They were born into the wrong body, as in God made a mistake. It's the same thing here with women's energy alone, to incite fear that God's perfect divine creation has a faulty design. This is also going to explain, because they care so much about us, right? Breast cancer awareness, because they care so much about us, is also going to explain why our benevolent leaders have also freed us from the home. As in, they freed us from our domestication duties, because they love us so much. In fact, as women, our home domain is where we are the stewards of the energy that we create and we keep. But by liberating us from the home, we actually have been thrust out of an environment where we are the stewards of and the creators of energy, and instead have been thrust into a corporate world where we are now influenced by the energy, thus throwing us further out of alignment. So it's a corruption. And we have also been turned into corporate slaves, because I remind you, we weren't freed from the home because anybody cared about us. Why tax only one half of the adult population when you can tax the entire adult population? Corporate slaves. Our sacred divine feminine energy, by being freed from the home and now being thrust into the corporate world, was a perversion. But further than that, our sacred divine feminine energy has been siphoned off of us with the normalization of hookup culture, which corrupts the sacred union between men and women. Because when we are embracing our divine sacred union, the energy flows like this. It's two halves of one whole connecting and feeding into the other half. So it is a self-maintained and sustained and regenerative energy. But because we have been encouraged to embrace hookup culture, it instead turns our divine masculine and feminine energy into this. Two halves of a whole moving in completely separate and opposite directions from one another. More examples of corruption. As women, we have been demeaned and diminished from being breastfeeders to being called chest feeders. And our breasts have been used to sell products, but shamed about feeding our babies with them in public. But I remind you, as women, we are portals. Our bodies are creating the bridge between the divine realm and the earth plane. Because just like Adam and Eve had the Garden of Eden to acclimate their energy to, and we don't know how long they were there, the gestation period that a woman is pregnant, that's us recreating the Garden of Eden. We are now the bridge between the realms. Because the Garden of Eden was only meant for the first two people that had bodies to acclimate to the energy here on earth. We were never meant to stay there. So our bodies as women are now the portals, is now the bridge between the 3D material plane and the divine realm where the souls originate from. We are the bridge between the divine realm and the earth plane in the absence of a Garden of Eden, because we were never meant to stay in the Garden of Eden. But now we are the Garden of Eden for the new souls that we usher into the world. And our homes are now the integration period for the new souls to experience contrast in before they are ready to go out into the world and experience further contrast. But it is with our divine guidance and connection to us. However, even this has been corrupted, with women receiving no paid maternity leave and normalizing relinquishing our newborns as young as 2 weeks old to paid caregivers so we can go back to feeding the matrix. We were all created with a spark of God inside of us in this 3D earthly domain, specifically so that we had a place to create in. But even that has been corrupted. Because we were designed to have a playground, i.e. the earthly domain that we could create in. That has been corrupted by us being saddled with debt, simply to live in the earth that we were born onto, and living like slaves to pay for basic living expenses. And at the end of the day, because of that, we are far too tired to even create. And further, we have been corrupted away, or we have been programmed away from our desire to create and to consume. Women, I am one, I'm not throwing shade at anybody, but women Do we not love to read our lady magazines? And in them, are insecurities not created in said magazines? So we are consuming programming in featuring impossible beauty standards because sometimes the pictures of women are in fact men. And if it's really a woman, they're heavily airbrushed, where there's no skin, there's no large pores and there's no blemishes on the skin, or the models or the actresses have all had plastic surgery. And so it's an impossible beauty standard. So the magazines that we are consuming are introducing to us insecurities. But don't worry, because they also sell us the solution in the same place that they have created the problem. Because by featuring impossible beauty standards, it gets us to look at ourselves critically and say, I don't look like that. I have pores, I have blemishes, I have saggy skin. But don't worry, turn the page, because on the very next page of the impossible beauty standards, they sell us the solution with the firming skincare. Even our very consumption, as in food, has been corrupted and perverted because the food that we now consume, our bodies no longer recognize as food because they are so heavily processed and devoid of any nutritional value. Thus, obesity and disease run rampant. And just like they've created the insecurity in the magazine and then they sell you the solution, they've created the disease and the obesity, and they've also created the solution with big pharma. And now the medication that we consume to treat the disease that they introduced also causes actual harm to us, because all it in fact is actually doing is not treating the underlying cause of the disease. All it in fact does is shut down our internal warning system that something is in fact wrong with our body. And thus, the average American is on 4 different medications, with each subsequent one that they take canceling out the side effects that the one before it actually caused. Because, again, big pharma medication doesn't treat the underlying cause. It only tells us there's a symptom. And then with each subsequent medication that we take, which does nothing but shut our body up, causes new symptoms. So then you need to take subsequent medication to shut your body up, because your body is trying to tell you that each medication that you're taking is causing actual harm. And now, on top of it, our already tortured bodies, which have been tortured from birth because we are blasted with heavy metals, even now our water and air supply, which are 2 necessities for life, and which should in fact be free and healthy, or at the very least should not cause further harm, do cause further harm. Because our water supply has been corrupted with the addition of fluoride, pharmaceuticals, chlorine, and heavy metals, and even our air supply is poisoning us with chemtrails, and God only knows what else Bill Gates is spraying in our air. Our connection to God, which is inherent and coded into us because we have a spark of the divine residing inside of us, has also been corrupted in a multitude of ways. First, by telling us or teaching us when we are little the concept of original sin, which didn't that also originate from the creation myth of Adam and Eve, that we are all born sinners? So when we were perfectly innocent, little newborn babies, we were born sinners. And how could God love a sinner, pray tell? And further corrupted by teaching that some of us were chosen people while others of us were not. further disconnecting us not only from God, because, oh, I'm not chosen, but also it's further disconnecting us from our, how many times can I say connected in 30 seconds? Apparently a lot. Further disconnecting us from our inherent interconnectedness, because we all came from the same two people, Adam and Eve, as in we're all related with one another. So how can one group of people be chosen and one not? We all came from the same two people. And that at the end of a long and hard life, if you yourself has done one too many sins, you're going to hell. Regarding hell, I have an excellent video on the subject linked down below, but please understand that the concept of hell was further designed to create a wedge between us and our connection to God. As in, we were unworthy and we sin, and thus we go to a location named hell, where we will be punished forevermore, further disconnecting us from God. You are a sinner. You were born a sinner. You've committed one too many sins. You're going to hell. No God connection for you. Rather than being taught at the end of our life, God wants nothing more than to reunite with us and to hear about our latest incarnation on the earthly domain. And how did we enjoy our time here? What were our soul contracts? What were our soul lessons? What did we create? Who did we love? Who were our friends? It's exactly the same as when our children come home from school at the end of the day and we delight in hearing about how their day went. Who did they play with? What did they learn? Who did they see? Did they have a good day? It's exactly the same with God, except it's not the day, it's the entirety of our life. Even the story of creation has been corrupted first and foremost by calling it a myth. This is why I said you gotta watch the segment at the beginning of the video, because according to Wikipedia, it is a creation myth. And because it is a myth and not a theory, they do not teach it in public school. You know what they teach in public school? The theory of evolution. Because one's a myth and one's a theory. So the myth is below the theory. Thus, they can teach the theory of evolution in public school, further aiming to disconnect us from our connection to God by telling us we're nothing more than happy accidents that evolved from amoebas. Compare and contrast that to being taught we were deliberately created by God because God loves us so much, because we are all God's children. And in fact, God loves us all the same, and God loves us all the same so much that He created this entire world that we get to create in and with by accessing the spark of the divine inside of us, because God is the OG creator. He created all life. He created us. He created Earth. He created everything. We have a spark of the OG creator inside of us that we can now create with, because God loves us so much. Compare and contrast that to you're a happy accident. How does it make you feel? This is done because there is a deliberate effort to undermine our inherent connection to God. By stating also that we are created from dust, also knocks us down a peg to tell us we were created from nothing more than the fuzz that coats your furniture if it has not been dusted in a while. Compare and contrast that to you were consciously and deliberately created. You were created from dust. As in, we ourselves are little more than dirt. Instead of stating that we were created from earth, because there is so much here in the 3D material plane for us and our interconnectedness to earth to relate to. And by teaching us that we were not in fact created from dust, but created from earth, this would instead fortify this idea that we are always connected energetically to this new domain that we were consciously created to coincide and to exist in. So when we're actually created from the earth, there's a natural resonance between us and our bodies and the earthly domain. So even though it's a heavy, dense energy that is akin to quicksand, since we ourselves are made from it, there's a natural vibrational resonance and familiarity between our bodies and earth. That will further fortify this conscious and intentionate and deliberate creation of God creating us in this 3D earthly domain from the actual earth that also is in the 3D material plane. Because can you create with dust? No. But earth? Imagine all the possibilities. You can create on it. You can create with it. And you can create in it. And you can even beautify the land itself, the earth itself. And that is just the earth alone. It is a material that we ourselves are in fact made from and thus so deeply connected to. And it is literally what we are here for, to create with the earth in the earthly domain. But dust? All you can do with dust is wipe it and move it, and then throw the material you wiped it away with, because it is nothing more than a nuisance. Do you see the difference? What we are also not taught is how much God loves us, and that our souls are eternal, and that we need not do anything to be worthy or deserving of the love that God freely gives us. We are also not taught how we are all God's children and how we are all loved the same, that one group of people is not more meaningful than another. In fact, that's been corrupted with race wars. We are not taught that God desires nothing more than to have a relationship with us, his children, and that he can hear us irrespective of how we choose to speak to him, and that we need not to commune with him in this church or in this synagogue or with this approved prayer book. We are not taught that God hears us no matter what, because we are already inherently connected to God. And we are not taught that the way that we are already connected to God is because we have a spark of divinity that already resides in us, in our soul, which comes from God. And we are also not taught that the way to get back to living in alignment in a deeply corrupted and perverted world is through love. Because it is that same love that God created us with that reunites us with our meaning and purpose in being here. It was with the love that God has for all of us that we were created to reside on the earthly domain. And the way that we return back to living in alignment with the intention of us being created here, through the love and the inherent connection that we already have to God. We don't need to go back to the Garden of Eden to connect with God. We already have God inside of us. So the way that we return is first with the love in our hearts for ourselves and our divine nature. Then, our love for others and their divine nature, and recognizing that irrespective of how we look and how we pray or where we live, we're all connected. And we are all, in fact, related. It is then by allowing us and the love in our hearts for ourselves and others to guide us into healthy, divine relationships with another, and a partner that will balance us out while honoring our separate and unique, but equal energies. And this is true whether it's a heterosexual or a same-sex relationship. It's finding the union with your partner. It's finding the balance. And then through the divine, energetic, and sacred sexual energy that is exchanged, it's creating a self-sufficient unit of regenerative and restoring love, but not creating an energy that is separate and divisive and can burn the ground down, a la a demon energy spirit like Lilith. Then, further, it is by loving ourselves and treating our vessels with love and respect and care by eating well. Because our physical vessel is houses our connection to the divine. This is the vehicle that houses the connection to the divine, in which we were created by and for, to have a 3D material plane that our bodies could create in. And then lastly, it is by starving the matrix, by withholding our attention from its programming, which is to consume, and getting back to the original intention of us being here, which was to create. So whether that is creating a human being by becoming a mother or father, or creating a garden, or creating pottery, or creating by painting, or creating by knitting hats and sweaters, or creating a YouTube channel, and maybe the merch to go along with it, or creating a business, or even recreating yourself exactly the way you want to be, do it. After all, it's what we're all here for anyway. So this concludes the energy reading into Adam and Eve, creation, and the Garden of Eden. I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I hope that you have found it to be insightful and maybe thought-provoking. However, because this is a video that challenges a lot of the norms or societal norms or programming of what we have told occurred in the Garden of Eden, I'm really going to encourage you with this one to please take what resonates, to leave the rest behind, and this is your reminder until next time to not only stay in the high vibration, but to create.